All right. Hi, guys. We're checking out the coordinate geometry review. So let's get started. I'm going to kind of cruise through these fast, but you can hang out with me and keep up. We're just trying to sketch this, so I need 2 points. I'd like to find where it hits the y-intercept. I know that it's not this way, and it's not this way. So it must be on, it has x to be 0 right on this y-axis. So let's put 0 in for x. That makes negative y equal -2, so positive y should be +2. So this should go right there. And then we're going to do the same trick with the other axis, the x-axis. So on this axis, I know it's not up, it's not down. I know that the y here should be 0. So let's put in 0 for y here. This becomes x minus 0, which is just x equals -2. So the x should be -2, should be right there. There's our line. There we go. All right. We're going to play the same game over here. And when this is 0, x equals, you divide by 7, x is 10 over 7. That's 1 3/7. So it's 1 and a little bit. So it should be like there, right? And then if we do the same thing for the other side, when x is 0, it'll be on the y-axis. So divide by 2, and y should be 5. Draw your line. Done. Moving on, we're trying to graph this. This is easier to graph. I think it starts at the y-intercept of -4. And here's our rise over run. If you look at this in terms of slope as a fraction, it's -7 over 1. So it goes down 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and over 1. That's not on our graph. So what we might have to do is go, instead of go down 7 and +1 over, we could go up 7 and backwards 1. They're the same thing. They're really just a slope of -7, however you want to look at it. So let's go from here up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and backwards 1. And it still should be on this line that we would have hit if you can draw a straight line. All right. Same sort of thing here. Y-intercept, slope. I'm going to call this -5/3, so -1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and run 1, 2, 3. There's our next point. There's our line. Great. All right. Find the slope through each pair of points. Well, slope is rise over run. The rise is the change in the y's, right? That little triangle. His name is delta. He means change. So change in the y's over change in the x's. So here are the y values, and you find the change by subtraction. -5 minus 7 over. Here are the x values, and you find them by subtraction. You find the difference by subtraction. So this should be, let's see, 5 minus 7 is, -12, right? And 20 minus 13 is 7. So I think it should be -12/7. Great. Doing the same thing here, we're trying to find the slope. Slope is rise over run, change in y's over change in the x's. So let's do, what color do we use? We use blue for the, so let's look at the change here. This is 8 minus 13 over -4 minus 20, right? So this should be 5 over this should be -5 over -24, so 5 over 24. It doesn't simplify any further than that. Great. All right, that's the end of our first page. Oh, moving on. Okay. So we are, again, writing the, I think the prompt was write the slope. So we want to find the slope of these two. Okay, well, slope is rise over run. Change in y's, so -3 minus 10 over -14 minus negative 14, right? If you subtract the top, you get negative 13. If you subtract the bottom, this is negative 14 minus negative, like this double negative minus a negative gives you plus 14, and so this should be 0. So the denominator here is 0. You can't divide by 0, so this has undefined slope. It doesn't mean it has 0 slope, it has undefined slope. It means you can't divide by 0, problem. All right, find slope here, same sort of thing. Change in y's, negative 19 minus negative 19 over the change in the x's, 1 minus 6. As you working this out, this becomes negative 19 minus the negative becomes plus, so negative 19 plus 19 is 0. So you just get 0 on top, and you get negative 5 on the bottom. 0 divided by negative 5 is 0, and so this has 0 slope, right? It's a horizontal line. So this, if we're trying to write the equation for the, like, if we were looking at the slope for this line, this has undefined slope in a vertical line. And this has 0 slope as a horizontal line. Cool? That's not what the question's asking us. This new set says write the equation. Well, all right, if we're trying to write the equation of the line, oh, sorry, making you sick. This point is 1, 2. This point is 1, 4. This point is 1, negative 3. This is a special line that's vertical, and its slope is undefined because it has some rise but 0 run. But it doesn't mean that it has no equation. Its equation is all of the x values, right? This is the x, this is the x, this is the x. All the x values are the same. They're all 1, right? So like this line has the equation, all my x values are negative 4, negative 4, negative 4, negative 4, right? So the vertical lines should be fairly easy to write the equation for. This is the same idea. What's this location? Well, that's 1, 5. This is 4, 5. This is negative 3, 5. All of the y values are the same here. So y equals positive 5. Ching. This would be y equals negative 3. No problem, right? Just as another example. If you wanted to write this out in full, it would look like y equals 0x plus 5, because the slope is 0. It doesn't rise, but it runs, right? So 0x. This is the best answer, though. All right. Write the slope-intercept form of these lines. Well, slope-intercept looks like y equals mx plus c, which means we want to put the x on one side and the whole number get y by itself. So let's isolate this piece first by subtracting 3x and subtracting 3x. So you should be left with negative 2y equals negative 6 minus 3x. Because we're nerds, we're going to turn this around, keep negative 3x here, minus 6 there. And then we got to get rid of this negative 2, so let's divide everything by negative 2. These cancel out, which is nice. You're just left with y. Here you have negative 3 divided by negative 2, and that is just positive 3/2. X minus a negative will be a plus, and this part's 3, right? 6 divided by 2, 3. Great. Same sort of thing here. We want to get y by itself, so let's subtract x. Subtract x. You're left with negative 6y equals, I'm going to put this first, negative x minus 42. When we divide by negative 6, we divide everything by negative 6, and you get, these cancel out, you're left with y. This becomes, the negative and negative becomes positive. Instead of calling it x over 6, I'm going to call it 1/6 times x. It's like x divided by 2 is the same as half of x. So I'm going to call this 1/6 x. Negative divided by, negative should give you a positive, and 42 divided by 6 is 7. So I think that should be fine there. Cool. We want to write this in these pieces in standard form, which looks like whole number x plus whole number y equals whole number. So x and y are both on the same side, and they're whole numbers. So let's move this piece first by subtracting half x. Subtract half x. These cancel out. You're left with y minus half x equals 2. And then we got to get rid of this denominator of 2. So let's multiply everything on this side by 2 and everything on this side by 2. So this would be 2y minus 2 times a half just gives you 1, which is what we were going for all along. And on this side, 4. Great, done. We're doing the same thing here. Let's add 1/4 x to this side and 1/4 x to that side. This becomes y plus 1/4 x equals -3, because this and this cancel out. And then let's multiply by this denominator to get rid of it. So let's multiply by 4, but you got to do it to both sides. So 4 times y gives you 4y. 4 times 1/4 gives you just 1x. And this gives you -12. Great, great. And then let's try these last two on this page. So write the slope-intercept form of the equation through these points, right? Slope-intercept is y equals mx plus c. We can find the slope, just like we were doing before, by saying slope is change in the y values, 2 minus -3, over the x values, -5 minus -4. If you clean that up, this should be, this is really 2 plus 3, so 5. And this is 5 plus, -5 plus 4, so -1, so the slope should be -5. So far this will look like y equals -5x plus c. We need to figure out this c value, which I don't know right now, but we can find that by picking a pair of coordinates, and it doesn't matter which one you choose. I might choose this one because there are fewer negatives in there. I know that this is an x and this is a y, so I'm going to substitute them in. Let's do it in red. In place of this x, I'm going to use this. All right, so this should be -5 times, instead of x, we're going to use -5. Still got my plus c that I don't know here. And instead of this y, I'm going to use 2. Because I know this x and y came from this equation. And now the only thing we don't know is c, but we can solve for it. -5 times -5 is 25. Still have c sitting there, and 2's on this side. If you subtract 25, you get c is -23. Great, so we've got c, we've got slope, plug it back in, right? Y equals -5x plus c. Done. Great. Try it one more time. So slope really is change in y's, -4 minus -2 over the change in the x's, 5 minus -5. So this gives you -4 plus 2, so it gives you -2 over 5 plus, minus negative is plus, so -2/10, otherwise known as -1/5. All right, so this should look like y equals -1/5 x plus c. I don't know what c is, but I can calculate it by picking either one of these x and y coordinates. I'm going to choose this one because there are fewer negatives, and that's nice for me. So instead of this x, I'm going to put in 5, and instead of that y, I'm going to put in that -4, right? Get c. All right, and then we solve for c by multiplying on this side. We go -1/5 times, -1/5 times 5 is -1. And then you just add a 1 to this side and that side. These cancel out, and you're left with c is -3. And so your equation for this should be y equals -1/5, this piece, x plus c. Since it's -3 or -3, leave it like that, and I think that's that piece. So there we go. Let's move on to the next page. All right, so we're trying to find the distance between each pair of points. So distance formula, we're going to use Pythagorean theorem, which is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. It's really just taking the legs of a right triangle and saying that this area and this area fit into the longest legged area, like that. And so these would be a squared and b squared, and they would fit into here nicely like we saw in class and make c squared. Now, we're not really interested in any of that in terms of area, but we are interested in terms of the length. So we could think of this as, if we figured out this length A and this length B, we could calculate that length C. So let's try that out. So this is A would be 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is 4 units, and B is 1, 2, 3 units. So you'd get A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And A is 4, and B is 3. So you get 16 and 9 equals C squared. This is 25 equals C squared. I don't want C squared, I want C, so let's take the square root of both sides. You should get C as 5. And so I think that is the case. Yep. All right. 18 might be a little bit uglier, but looks like this. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sorry, 6 and 3. And so 6 squared plus 3 squared should equal C squared. Let's see. This is 36 and 9 is C squared. And so this is what, 47? Sorry, 45. I've only had 6 cups of coffee. 45 is C squared, and so C should be the square root of 45. That's great there, or if you want to run it as a decimal, square root of 45 is about 6.71. We like this format better because it's exact, but this is okay, so I'm happy with either of these. Ka-ching, ka-ching. If you're a true math nerd, you're going to take this and do this trick. You'll say root 45 is really, we're going to simplify the radical, we're going to turn this into a multiplication involving the largest perfect square. So 9 and 5, right? 9 times 5 is 45. What we can do with that is break it up into root 9 and root 5. Root 9 is 3 and root 5 is root 5. So this is the same thing as this or this. It's just simpler than this and more exact than that. So I'm happy with these two, but this is like 7-8 material if you can figure out how to do that with me. All right. 19, they want the distance again between these 2 points. We could graph them, but I know that wherever they are on the graph, if this is 6, -3, and this is 5, -8, like that, right? This distance is just the distance between here and here, right? So we're going from -3 up to -8, so this is an increase in 5. This distance is just the distance from here to here. We're going from 6 down to 5, so this is -1. I know it's sort of backwards looking, but it's all right. And then there's your C, so this becomes 5 squared plus -1 squared should equal C squared, right? A squared plus B squared equals C squared. This is 25 plus 1 squared is 1, is C squared, so C should be the square root of 26. I don't think that simplifies any nicer than that. All right, then this piece becomes, let's get rid of this black mess. We're doing the same thing here. If you think about this like 2, 6, and 6, -2, right? This part of the triangle, we're trying to find this distance, right? This part of the triangle is the change in the y values. So how do you go from up here at 6 down here to -2? Well, that's a decrease in 8. You could think about it as -2 minus 6, this minus this, right? That gives you -8. And then over, you go from 2 up to 6, right? That's an increase of 4, so this is 4. So we're left with a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and the c is that long side. And this should be what, positive 64 and 16 should give you your c squared. So 64 and 16 is, so c should be the square root of 80, I think. If you take the square root of 80, you get about 8.94. If you simplify square root of 80, it looks like this. If you want to take the simplified form of the radical, if you're pushing that 7 and 8 boundary, it looks like this. We're going to take root 80, and we're going to break 80 into a perfect square. I think 80, you can think about 80 as 4 times 5, right? You can think about it as 4 times 20. Here, let's undo that a little bit. You can think about it as 4 times 20. That's 80. You could think about 20 as 4 times 5. And then you could break this apart. So this becomes 4 and 4 and root 4 and root 4 and root 5. So this becomes 2. This is another 2, and this is root 5. Multiply your 2's and you get 4 root 5. This is exact. That's 7, 8 material. This and this, 5, 6 material. Cool. All right. Find the midpoint. All right, well, the midpoint is halfway between these two. The midpoint is the average of the x and the average of the y's. So let's average these x's. This is -5 plus -5 divided by 2. All right, this is -10 divided by 2. This is -5, right? As you'd expect, the average of -5 and -5 is 5. You'd average these, right? Take the y values and average them. So -6 plus 2 over 2. This is -4 over 2. This is -2. So your midpoint should be at -5 comma -2. You can also do it on a graph, but that's slow and boring. Cool, same thing here. Average of the x's, oh sorry, well I guess we'll do the y's first, huh? Average of the y's, 1 plus -3 over 2, so -2 over 2, so -1. Midpoint is average of the x's, so 4 plus 9 over 2, so 13 over 2. Ew, so this is like 12 halves plus 1 more half. Oops, sorry. Right, 13 halves. So this is 6 plus a half, so 6.5 or 6.5. So this should be 6.5 comma -1 as the midpoint. Cool. All right. Let's play the same game here. Let's take the average of the x's. Before we do that, I'm going to just change this into a improper fraction. So this is like saying 5 plus 2/3. 5 is really 15/3 plus 2/3, right? 15 divided by 3 is 5, so 15/3, and then we can add them. So this is 17/3. So the real name for this is 17/3. And so that's fine. That might help us in the future. And then with this guy, This is 13/7. Ooh, 7. So this is, let's see, 7/7 and 6 more sevenths. Oh, why am I changing it? Leave it like it is. Okay, so now let's get to averaging them. We're going to take this and average them. So 17/3 plus -5/3 over 2 should be the average of our x's. This should be 12/3 over 2. 12/3 is 4 over 2, should be 2. Yeah, 23, yep, 2, I like it. And then here's the average, the midpoint is the average of the y values, so 1 plus -13/7 over 2. 1 is 7/7 minus 13/7 all over 2. Let's see, so this is -6/7 all over 2. You could think about it like this: -6/7 divided by 2 over 1, right? And when you divide fractions, you flip the second one and you multiply. So this becomes, you multiply everything on top. So -6 times 1 is -6, and then 7 times 2 is your 14. What can we divide by 2? So divide top and bottom by 2. So this becomes -3 over 7, and I think that's our y coordinates. So our midpoint is at 2 comma -3/7. That's awful, but I think that's the solution. All right, and for this last Burley one, we've got, let's change this into, this is 1 and 1/6, so that's 6/6 and 1/6, so that's 7/6. So this is really 7/6. Oy. This is, let's call, the whole thing's negative, so let's just call it 3 plus 3/5, so that's 15/5. 15 divided by 5 is 3, and 3 more fifths, so that's 18/5. So this thing is 18/5, and this one is 11/5 by the same process. Cool. All right, so let's take the midpoints, right? Average of the x's is 7/6 plus this 5/6, right? Divided by 2. So this should be 7, 12, 12/6 divided by 2, which is nice because 12/6 is 2, divided by 2 should be 1. Great, I like that. And then the average of the y's should be 18/5 plus, oh, sorry, this is -18/5 plus 11/5 divided by 2. So this should be -7/5 divided by 2, which is like saying -7/5 divided by 2 over 1. When you divide fractions, you take the second one, flip it, and multiply, and then you multiply everything on top. -7 times 1 is -7. Everything on the bottom, 5 times 2 is 10, -7/10. And so there's your midpoint values, 1 and -7/10. Cool. The ones with these ugly fractions, that's like 5/6 material. Maybe this is a 6 material because that's hard. Things like this with no fractions, that's like a 4. Cool? All right. Find the slope-intercept form of the equation. Great, no problem. We want to make this look like y equals mx plus c. We want it parallel to this line, so we want to keep the same slope. So y equals 2x plus c. I don't know c, but I know an x and a y coordinate, so let's put them in. So let's call this y equals 2x plus c. 2 times 1 is 2. Subtract a 2 from both sides. These cancel out, and you're left with 2 equals c. So your equation should be y equals slope x plus c. Yeah, I like it. Same thing, we want it parallel to this line, so we're going to steal this slope. So y equals -8/3 x plus c. Here's an x, here's the y that they told us works for this equation. So put in your y value, put in your x value. What's nice is this piece is -8/3 times 3 over 1, right? The 3's cancel out, and you're just left with the -8. So you're just left with -8 plus c, -4. That's lovely. If we add 8 to this side and add 8 to that side, you're left with c is 4, and so your equation should be y equals -8/3 x plus 4. I like it. All right. So now we're getting fun. They want our next line perpendicular to this line, so we steal this slope. So our initial slope is +2/7. So therefore our perpendicular slope is going to be the same fraction flipped over and made negative. It's the opposite reciprocal. So we're going to use this slope and then play this same game. Right, we're going to say, I know my equation is going to be y equals -7/2 x plus c. Okay, no problem. Here's an x and here's a y value that they've graciously given to us. Plug in your y value for y. Plug in your x value for x. And all we need to do is solve for c. Here, these the 2's cancel out because this is 7 divided by 2 times 2. You're just left with -7 plus c. Let's add a 7, add a 7. I think you get c is 5, +5. So our equation ends up looking like y equals -7/2 x plus 5. Sweet. These are like 5/6, maybe. Yeah, these are like 5/6. This we want perpendicular. Here's our slope. This slope initially is 5, meaning 5 over 1. It's positive, so our perpendicular slope will be negative and flipped over. Same thing, y equals -1/5 x plus c. Here's an x, here's a y. Plug in your x. Oop, backwards. Why didn't you tell me? Gosh. All right, plug in your y value. This guy, and plug in your x value, and all we need to do is solve for c. Here the negative and the negative become positive, and 1/5 times 5 is just 1. The 5's cancel out essentially, and then all you need to do is subtract 1. Subtract 1, those cancel out, you're left with c is -3, and so your equation should be y equals slope x plus c. Done. All right, so there are the solutions. If you'd like to verify mine, I may have made mistakes. I do that sometimes. These are leveled, and they're similar to what we've done, so I'm not going to go through them. If you'd like, I can show you in class. All right, and also I wanted to show you one of these. Let's look at maybe 16. There are videos on the VLE, my videos, about how to take data like this and input them into your calculator, you need to put it in the stats key and put it in edit and put the x's in L1 and the y's in L2, right? And then you go back to the stats key and you go over and you say calculate, and you ask it to calculate a linreg, a linear regression, an equation. And so when I did that with this data, I put all this data in and I got a linear regression that said y equals ax plus b. They said a equals 11.14 dot dot dot, b is 309.76 dot dot dot, r squared is 0.46 dot dot dot, and r is 0.681 dot dot dot. And they ask us to use this. Like, this is great, but I want to interpret it, right? So this is make a scatter plot. We can make a scatter plot by just plotting all this data. How much fat, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so this would be fat, and this would be calories. And you'd plot them like that. And what this line represents, this y equals 11.14x plus 309, right, from A and B. This is the equation that describes this line. So in the second part, it says find the correlation coefficient and the equation of the line of best fit. Here's the equation of the line of best fit. And here's the R value is this correlation coefficient. That's this piece. Correlation coefficient here is 0.68. 0.68 says this is a moderately strong, or maybe a moderately, strong positive correlation. Positive means as you increase the amount of fat, the calories are going to go up. As one thing increases, the other increases as well, right? What we really want to do is this piece. Predict the amount of fat in a sandwich with 100 calories. Okay, well, this y value was the calories, and this x value was the fat. So what we can do is take our equation, y equals 11.4x plus 309, and input, instead of this x, put our 500 calories of fat. Oh, sorry, backwards. Calories is our y value. So let's put it in here. All right, so say 500 should equal 11.4x plus 309, and now we just need to solve for x. So subtract 309 from both sides, so 500 minus 309. So now we got 191 equals 11.4x, and then divide by 11.4. And I got 16.75 grams of fat. Cool. All right. So for 17, I took this data and I put it in the calculator. I put this in L1 and this in L2, and I did the same thing. If you don't know how to do that, check out my other video. This says make a scatter plot. We don't necessarily need to do that, but this would be temperature and this would be rain. So it looks like it's doing this, right? So as the temperature gets higher and higher, there's less rainfall. And we want to find an equation for this line, right? And a correlation coefficient. When I plug this into my calculator, it gives me y equals ax plus b. It tells me a is negative 0.346, b is 106.4, r squared is 0.49, and r is negative 0.703. All right, that's great, but that doesn't mean much to us unless we use it for something. So find the correlation coefficient and the line of best fit. Well, the line of best fit is y equals negative 0.346x plus 106.4, right? It comes from these two. We just put those in A and B because it's A and B. So that's the line of best fit. Correlation coefficient is this R value. So correlation coefficient is negative 0.703, so it's strong. I guess it's moderately strong. It's below 80%. Moderately strong and negative correlation. Cool. It means it's pretty good, but it's going downhill. So this isn't in one of the questions, but I think it's important to be able to do this. So maybe we should predict, like, if it's if the temperature today is what 20. Oh, it's in Fahrenheit. Let's call it 70. Let's say the temperature is 70 degrees Fahrenheit. What's the rainfall? Well, temperature is the X value, so plug it in there. This is Y equals negative 0.346 times 70 plus 106.4. I just made up the 70 as an example. So let's try that. Negative 0.346 times 70 equals negative 24 plus 106.4 should give you 82.18. And that would be our rainfall in millimeters. They didn't ask us this question. I just made this up to show you the application. Cool. Systems of equations we haven't really seen. That's a little more of a 7 and 8 style question, but there's videos up on the VLE if you're interested. Cool. Good luck.